We are now inviting Bård, Vegar, Solhjell from the Socialist Left Party and Kjell, Ingolf, Ropstad from the Christian Democratic Party up on the stage. And if you invited in Denmark the Socialist Left Party and the Christian Democratic Party to a debate, it would almost be people that would agree totally, or at least on development assistance. So I'm very much looking forward to see if this is the case also in Norway. And I don't encourage you to fight. You don't need to fight if you can find solutions and agreements. But definitely I hope you will be bold and also try to answer some of these very big questions that we also asked before. Does Nordic exceptionalism still exist? What is the definition of development decisions today and what is the future? So please, I don't know who wants to start. Maybe Kjell, you would like to start?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. I would say it's a perfect timing for this report. Because, yes, I would say it still exists, but it's changing. And what we are about to see in all the four different countries, I would say leads in a direction that I don't like. And I would say that, yes, it's a new time. It is a very special situation for Norway, but for the whole Europe and the whole world. And Norway and the other Nordic countries as leaders in development questions, what we do is important also for other countries. So we could lead in a direction, and the direction we choose now, I think, is wrong. So I would say it's perfect timing to take the discussion, where do we want to go? And my former, or our former Prime Minister, Kjell Bondevik from my party, he used to say, when he spoke about foreign affairs, he spoke about value-based foreign affairs. Now it's interests, own interests. So I would say one of the most important things is that what we do in foreign policy is not, I could say, not only for own interests, because I know that it's also for own interests, but it's based on values, based on what we can do to fight poverty.
Thank you very much. And just a follow-up question. I know you're also part of discussing this currently in the debates in Parliament. How strong is this a case for your party in terms of many other pressing issues on the agenda? How important is developing assistance as a subject compared to other issues?
I would say it's the most important. Okay. And for those Norwegians who read the biggest newspaper, Vegar, yesterday, then second biggest, that's true. But on the internet, it's the biggest, I would say. Okay. Yeah. My party leader said, he used the ultimatum word. This is so important for us that we need to get more money to finance development aid. But I would also add that this is not, for me, only a question about 2016 and the budget. It's a question about 2020. Because what we do this year, I would say, impact the next budget and the budget after, and also international it affects. So our party wants a change when we have negotiations, both to of course get more money to the poorest people, not in Norway, but also as an important step for the years to come.
Right, thank you very much for making it clear. It is the most important, it is an ultimatum, as you're saying, in terms of other issues. Let's go to the Socialist Left Party, Bård. What is your analysis about this?
Well, my first analysis is that it's great to be here with so many people to discuss these issues. That could be, this could be a very important change in Norwegian development policy happening in just a few autumn months with almost no discussion. So thanks for you for actually creating at least a little discussion, or quite a few people here. Then I will not fight Kjell Ingolf, but I will hold you totally responsible for the outcome of the negotiations with the government, which I think is...
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's much worse. Fighting me. Then just a few words on the issue, because I do believe that this is a serious, not a serious moment only here, but in the Nordic countries in Europe, in terms of the development policy, so to say. And I listened very carefully to the deputy minister's speech here, and I have to say I hope it will be published, because my reading of that speech was that our current government has already gone a long way to cancel Nordic exceptionalism. Because you were speaking as it has maybe not been there, and it doesn't seem to be so important anymore. And especially one thing I found a little bit provocative in the speech was the use of the word realism. That there's now, we have to be realistic and do adjustments, for instance, in our budget now to realism. But my view is that the current budget is not an adjustment to realism, but an adjustment to fiction. Because there's nothing that's happened in the world that makes aid 4 billion Norwegian kroner less important in a few months now. Rather the opposite. Of course, the great news is that private investments is increasing, so it's a much bigger part of all capital flowing into the south. But that doesn't make aid less important, and in important parts of the world, in Africa, it's still extremely important for development. And I just came from listening to Robert Putnam, the famous American social scientist, earlier today, who's written about a book called Our Kids, and he writes about what we conceive as us in a society. And he says that in America, when I grew up, it sounds a bit nostalgic, but it isn't. When he grew up, in his town, when we said our kids, we meant our kids need a new swimming pool. We meant the kids in our town need a new swimming pool, so maybe they should build one in the school. Now we say our kids, I mean, my 3 kids need one swimming pool in the backyard. And this is to make an analogy to the world, because we are one world. We together need to fix some problems. That's also why I think the debate on altruism misses out a bit. I don't think I'm more altruistic than Kjell Ingolf or even Per Sandberg, or maybe I am, by the way. But anyway, I don't know if I am. But that's beside the point. The point, I'm not in favor of development aid or a good development policy just because of idealism or altruism. Because I think it's in my interest to fight global inequality, climate change, increasing migration, and so on. It's based on an interest, but it's a little bit more complex interest than just making money for our businesses, for instance. And that's why what you showed here, building the new, let's not call it, it's not important that it's a Nordic exceptionalism, but a new reasoning behind a stronger development policy. So let's face that realities don't mean that we have to cut. Realities mean that we have to invest more in fighting climate change, global poverty, migration, and so on in the years to come.
All right, thank you very much. Also a very powerful statement. And let me allow a follow-up question, because isn't that what's happening globally now? I mean, I know we have the SDG commitment, which is extremely ambitious. But if you look around the European context, aid is being cut, it is being more self-interest. If you look to the Dutch, the UK scene, very much focusing on impact for money, everybody needs to show results. Isn't what's happening in Norway, in Denmark, Sweden, Finland, isn't that what just is happening everywhere?
I agree. There's a tendency to different degrees in European countries now of cutting aid or using the mechanism that is, of course, formally allowed to include expenses to not migrants but refugees in our own country into aid. But there is also a broader policy framework stating that aid isn't as important anymore. so we don't need to spend that much. But of course also the economic crisis, not for Norway, but for many other countries, we should face, of course, the fact that the economic crisis is changing the debate. And that's understandable in Greece and Italy and Spain, I think, but not so much in Norway, maybe. But what I think is important for us politicians is to fight the concept of self-interest, as self-interest being everything that is, we can make money out of just now. It's in our self-interest in the future to fight some of the causes of the migration we are now seeing, or to fight, to keep up our natural capital, reduce climate change and so on. And of course, global poverty. And I think maybe that's the most important political debate now in Norway, not losing the support for these policies that has been broadly among most parties in Norway.
And let me go to the global scene then, because I mean, there will be consequences. There will be either organizations or projects or countries that won't get the same level of support, not just from Norway, from all the Nordic countries. But what is the impact on our image internationally? I mean, you as MPs visit a lot of countries, you get a lot of international negotiations and so on. What do you think the impact will be on our international image that we are now scaling down on our development assistance?
Of course, it will not be better for Norway or we will not be listened that much to as a country or countries. And the influence on the important discussions, as for example the SDGs, will be lesser because we are not that important as donors, for example, to the UN. But I would also add that in Europe there are different answers. Sweden are looking about 50%, cutting the development aid with 50%. But Germany, they said we are rising from 0.3 to the goal 0.7, and they don't, as you showed, use that much of the budget, or they don't use anything actually. 0.9 was it or something on refugee costs. So there are different answers, and I would say look to Germany, not look to Sweden. But hopefully, I would say to the Swedish guests here, I hope that Sweden don't want decide that so much of the budget should go to refugee costs in our own country. And I would say, as I saw the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General said today that it's counterproductive to cut budgets to finance refugee costs in your own country. And I would say that's an important message to all the countries. And I also a bit afraid of the discussion I heard that Erik Solheim was here earlier about what is possible to notice as ODA-DAC approved money. Because you know the discussion about the terrorism, defense costs, now it's refugee. Somebody is talking about not only the first year but 3 years. Our own supporting our own businesses and so on. So it's a broader discussion than not just this single discussion we have at least in Norway right now.
I think it's important not to exaggerate on this point, because it's not like Norway will totally lose all influence if you have one round of cuts, for instance. I was asking the Minister of European Affairs, Vidar Helgesen, about this in the Storting, because I was complaining that it's not a good idea to cut down on energy and environmental development assistance just before Paris, because it gives the right signal. And he was comforting me with saying that, well, other countries are cutting even more. Like that was supposed to comfort me. But the point is that we are probably not losing much influence just in this aspect. I think we should focus more on the result and the tendency. And if this tendency if this budget is approved, I think it will be a signal that this is possible to do in Norway. And I think it will start a tendency where those who have meant this for a long time, tried to cut it, know that it's actually possible to do it. And then secondly, if you look internationally, it is of course true that, and also for Norway, that other parts of the development policy than just aid is more important now than before. But our answer to that should not be to focus less on aid, but to focus more on issues like our businesses and how they conduct in different countries. The Norwegian Petroleum Fund, extremely important in development policies. Capital flight, all those issues. And I think many of those who are criticizing that aid is too important and now and we are overplaying it, they do not follow up with emphasizing the other important parts of development policies. So that should rather be our goal, to look more carefully on those and to use those tools better.
And if I could add, because I totally agree with Bård Vegar, and I think it's also important that when we do these kind of decisions, they need to be based on facts. It needs to be based on knowledge. And when we talk about, okay, foreign aid is not that important for so many countries anymore, but it still is important for the poor people. And there are different ways of giving foreign aid, and as you showed, civil society in Norway, foreign aid through civil society is cut by, or the suggestion from the government is that it should be cut with 67%, and that's a good way to cut a good channel to reach the poorest in countries that are not that poor, because we know that a lot of the people that are poor in the world lives in countries that we don't want to give aid just to the state. So this is also very important when we have these discussions, that the decisions we made should not be made just in a few weeks because we need some money. Of course, we have so much money in Norway. It's so easy to make a budget with more money to foreign aid if we want, but that means that we can't not give the tax to lower the taxes, sorry, or all the other important issues for all the parties. So we just need to say that, okay, this is so important for us. We need to stay on the same track as we did before. We, as a so rich country, need to send a signal to the world. We don't want that every country is cutting the development budget that much.
Right. I think we ended up in almost consensus, as I predicted that would have happened in Denmark. But I'll allow you for a last quick sort of statement. And there, of course, we would like to see even more commitments on what will you do next in terms of protecting and not reversing the end of exceptionalism. But let me just also invite, if Tone Skogen, the Deputy Minister, wants to have a word in the end, you're welcome also on the stage. You don't have to, but just give you that invitation. But maybe, Bård, if you could start.
Let me first give Kjell Ingolf a challenge here, because I know, of course, that it's a difficult task you're up to. And one of the issues that is a bit difficult to understand in the budget, I mean, it is understandable that many parts of the budget, many ministries had to take cuts, but that there's such a big cut to civil society is complex to understand. But I'll tell you a secret if you promise not to tell anyone. And that is that I think this is, when you have a minority government with negotiations in the Storting, there will be a certain game to this, that the government will leave some posts to finance because they reckon you to fix them. And I think one of them, this is one of the things
I
that
agree.
you're supposed to fix. So just not to put a burden on your shoulders, but I think you should fix it. Then thirdly, I think this debate should be much bigger than just within the kind of people that I know some of you from before, so to speak, than just this milieu or this conference. This is an important debate on the direction of what's been a very important part of Norwegian foreign policy for many years. And that, I think, is our common task after this budget, to raise a big debate on the direction of the policies in the years to come, and the direction of the policies when a new government comes into office after 2017. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I would say this is the new future. People are moving. More people will come. Due to climate change, conflict, so on. More people will come. We need to address this question with a broader mind and to be sure what we are doing. We need to focus on them, not us. We need to focus on Africa, not Norway. We need to focus on values, not own interests. And we are doing that right now. Because, as I said, I don't think this is a question not only about the budget for next year. This is a question for many years to come. And we, as Nordic countries, need to raise a voice. In Norway, we have this saying, it's better to hang together than to be hanged each one on one. I don't know if that's possible to say in English, but for you Norwegian, you understand it. Yeah, but if they understand it. But it's not only. So I think it's important that, yes, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Deputy Minister can say, this is the rules. Of course, we can just use the refugee or the budget to finance the refugee costs. I agree, totally agree. But I think also that will happen in many, many countries. And this question is not, is it okay? But or is it allowed? The question is it okay? Do we want to go in that direction? And where is the line? Is it 50% as Sweden? Where is it? So your government spent a lot of money on the same issue when there was not coming 30,000, but fewer. And the same discussion is there right now. But the answer is not if it's allowed or not. But the question we should raise is it the right thing to do right now? And the answer is, of course, no.
Thank you very much. And for the last comment, Tone, just for, we have 2 minutes left, so please.
Okay, I'll be quick and thank you. I certainly welcome a debate on how Norwegian development policies can have an even better impact. That we certainly do welcome. And I'm also happy to hear that the priorities, the values, we tend to agree on. So that's another good outcome of this debate. There was an issue here asking for the facts, that we should have a debate based on the facts. And as was just now hinted to, I just want to remind you that when Mr. Solhjell was in government, they used about or spent about 10% of the budget on about half the amount of refugees. This was in 2009, 2010. So getting the facts right, what we are doing now is pretty much a copy-paste of what was done by the former government. I did say in my remarks that we have noticed certainly some of the criticism that has been coming. But again, back to the facts, I believe it's fair to say, and I would like to tell you that according to the statistics we have, last year we allocated money from the budget to 1,100 NGOs, both Norwegian and international. Total amount of more than 7 billion Norwegian kroners. And although this year there has been proposals to cut the budget, I would also like you to keep in mind that we have increased humanitarian budget, the proposal for that, and there are also other channels where the NGOs might be able to apply for money. So our estimate is that for next year, the amount for the civil society NGOs will again be pretty high. So just since we are talking about the facts, and let me just lastly inform you about one piece of what I think is very good news, what is referred to as the Commitment to Development Index will be released very shortly. I have been fortunate to see some of the results, some of the outcome, and we are very pleased that Norway will now move from number 5 last year till number 3 this year. So evidently something has been done pretty good. So I think we should end this section with that note, and at least we are very pleased that that is the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tone. And on that, let me just say there's a lot of issues still to be discussed on facts. It will happen in Stortinget, it will happen in discussions around the national budget. But there's also a lot of discussions around this discussion that we had today, bringing it out of this room, out in Norway, out in Denmark, Finland, and Sweden. And I think that's a common challenge for all of us, not just discussing with the already enlightened and the ones that in Denmark we call it Osteklokken. The bell where you keep the cheese under. Because that's where, it's a good smell, we know each other, it's fine, but we need to get out there, even though it's a difficult and probably smelly discussion, we need to go out there and begin. So with that challenge, thank you very much for this morning. We have a few presents for the MPs and the Deputy Minister, but the rest of you enjoy your lunch and thank you very much.